We had just declared our independence and won. We have separated from Great Britain. Now it was time for us to step up and set up a government that was going to be for us, by us, to embody all of those ideas that were American. This is America's first attempt at a democracy. We're going to keep in mind, how did America's pre-revolutionary relationship with England influence the structure of our first national government? And we also want to identify some of the weaknesses that were existent in the Articles of Confederation that led to an effort to draw up a new constitution. There we were, fresh, new, the world at our feet. We could create any type of government we wanted. And we decided to create one that was the opposite of what we had suffered through. However, if you have ever heard somebody say, if at first you don't succeed, try again, that's what happened to the framers. Perhaps somewhere along your life, you have done something that you thought was a good idea at the time, but then later on realized, not so much. The same thing happened to these guys as they created America's first democracy. It didn't go so good. The Articles of Confederation. Now, it was designed to be weak because the leaders were fearful. We were afraid of a powerful national government. We were afraid of what a strong parliament could do. We were afraid of what a king could do. We didn't want any government to be so strong that it could trample our rights as individuals. So we created the weakest possible national government that we could think of. Most power within this government would rest with the 13 individual states of America. In fact, if you ever take a close look at the Declaration of Independence, we are the United States of America. The U is not capitalized. Emphasis on the states. After all, we saw ourselves as residents of these individual states. We saw ourselves as Virginians, as Georgians, as those from New York or Massachusetts. That was our homeland, and we were going to be loosely tied with the other members of these states. The Articles, they were weak. How about taxes? Nope, can't do it. In the Articles of Confederation, the National Congress was not given the power to tax. You might wonder to yourself, how can you run a government without the power to tax? Exactly. There was no power to regulate commerce. Absolutely not. Each state was left individually to decide how it would trade with each other and with foreign nations. And with no power to set up and regulate commerce, each state would argue and fight and press for the advantage. A common currency? Not hardly. Most of the states were left to create their own currency. Some even used Old British currency or Spanish currency. Lawmaking? Yes. Congress, in the Articles of Confederation, could make a law, but it was difficult. It would take 9 out of the 13 states to agree for any one law to pass. Like 9 states are going to agree on anything. Exactly. But suppose they did pass a law. Who was there to enforce it? The executive branch? Not so fast. There was no executive branch. Yes, they could make a law, and they could say, hey, Virginia, here's the law, you better obey it, or else you'll feel really sorry about it in the morning. There was no way to enforce these laws. There was no judicial branch to carry them out to see whether or not laws had been broken. All laws were left to the states to enforce. And so if there was a law a state didn't like, it didn't have to play along. And of course, there was no ability for the national government to solve any type of interstate disputes. If one state had an argument over territory, over commerce, over anything, They were left themselves to figure it out. As you can see, the Articles of Confederation had too many weaknesses. It was impossible to get this document amended, as any amendment would require all 13 states to agree. It was time to try again. Too much power was given to the states, not enough power to that central government. As Ben Franklin said, "What a victory for our enemy," meaning Great Britain, "to find we cannot govern ourselves. Here we have fought and won our independence. We have moved away and separated from home, moved out on our own, only to realize we can't handle the freedom. Our territory was simply too vast to govern with a weak government. We had strong economic troubles. Most of the states had incurred huge debts during the Revolutionary War. We owed other nations and each other, even Great Britain, a great deal of money. There was no common currency to help establish an economic system. There were border disputes as the territories to the west were argued over, and of course, as I mentioned, no standard currency, no unifying feature. We were 13 independent states who just happened to be friends. This was no way to run a government. Oops, time to try again. The Articles of Confederation was simply too weak. We needed to set up a stronger government. We needed to create a new constitution, one that would be strong enough to govern the vast territory, one that would be strong enough to hold this nation together. In 1785, George Washington called on some of his friends and took a look at the Articles of Confederation and realized it wasn't worth changing. It needed to be replaced. A convention was called. The men met in Philadelphia, in the very same room where they had signed the Declaration of Independence. A new type of government was going to be written, a new constitution for the United States of America. Signed in September of 1787, that document went into effect the following year, by 1789, and is still in working condition today, making ours the oldest living government in the world. In our next section, we'll go over some of the elements of that document and why it is such an important document to the rest of the world.